Hello, and welcome to the Pflaum Gospel Weeklies Unit 2 overview for Venture. Thank you for joining us. I'm David DeZina, publisher at Pflaum. For those of you returning, welcome back. And for those who are new to these webinars, we're pleased you are joining us for this informal review of each lesson. If you have any questions or suggestions about a particular lesson or level, you can email us at editor@pflaum.com. Please refer to your copies of your lessons and teaching guide if you have them with you. And since this is being recorded, you can either watch the entire webinar or skip to the lesson you're about to teach. Please share this recording with fellow catechists, teachers, and parents. Nicole, the editor of Venture, will now present the overview of Unit 2, followed by an overview of the bilingual edition by Erica. First, here's an opening prayer. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. God, thank you for inviting us to join your family. Help our family live holy lives. Spread your love and be kind to one another. Amen. Thank you. And Nicole, please take it away.
Thanks, David. We are going to look at Unit 2, which runs from November 17th of 2019 through January 12th of 2020. And if you've joined us before, some of this introductory information will be a repeat, but bears repeating, and I hope will be helpful to anyone who's joining us for the first time. One thing that I'd just like to talk about in general is if you have your lessons and your teaching guide in front of you, I can't emphasize enough that the teaching guide is really important to have with you, both as you plan and as you're teaching the lesson. And because it's that book that you always wanted when you were a kid. You wanted the teacher's book. It has all the answers. It has conversation prompts. It's that all-knowing book. However, if we forget anything, we also have an online resource. If we forgot to answer a question, or we want to add to it, or if we want the assembly instructions for an activity, we'll put it all into our lesson updates on gospelweeklies.com. So I urge you to look at that teaching guide and to use that online resource of the lesson updates. Teaching guides are also available on the website if you happen to forget your copy or you need to share with a substitute. If you open up that teaching guide, you'll see that in each lesson we list the basic items you will need for your class: pens and pencils, art supplies, game pieces, different things. In this unit, one thing, just as a heads up, this unit includes all 4 weeks of Advent, and as a part of that, your prayer service will include an Advent wreath. So depending on your classroom space, you may want to do a live evergreen wreath, you may want to do an artificial evergreen wreath, or there are wreath instructions where you use green construction paper and trace the children's hands and form them into a paper Advent wreath, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Again, I'd like to emphasize the importance of establishing a classroom. Important for establishing the classroom routine is to have a dedicated prayer space in your classroom. And if you don't have a regular classroom, this can be as simple as a small box, a fabric cover, tablecloth in the liturgical color if you can, a Bible, a candle, just so you have that dedicated space for your students so that you can begin and end each of your class sessions in prayer. I want to take a quick note about Unit 2. This is a big unit. It is the same length. It's still 8 lessons like all of the other units. However, it runs from the last Sunday in ordinary time through, but it covers Advent, Christmas, Epiphany, and ends with the baptism of the Lord. Advent, as you know, is always jam-packed with extra activities. So I'd encourage you to page through your entire nest of lessons in case you know that your class time is going to be preempted by pageant rehearsals or other seasonal programming. I'd also like you to take note that the Christmas and Epiphany lesson is a combined lesson Most schools and parishes are back in regular session by Epiphany, and if that's the case for you, don't send that lesson home. However, if your class or your school or parish isn't back in session until after Epiphany, you're going to want to send that lesson home. It includes the full gospel for both Christmas and Epiphany, and is a nice opportunity for to families to read those gospels together. Before we begin, again, if you gather your teaching guide, your Unit 2 lessons, and a copy of the What the Church Believes and Teaches Catechism Handbook, I'd recommend that you have these three components sitting in front of you every time you begin to plan your lesson. So let's go ahead and turn to the first lesson, which should be up. This is the 33rd Sunday in Ordinary Time, November 17th. The cover shows us the theme for this week's lesson. Jesus calls us to stand up, give the students time for quote matching and writing their own quotes. If they struggle, brainstorm a list of issues that they may be passionate about. For many students, this theme will resonate, and they'll think about standing up for their friends in situations like if they're bullied or excluded. The theme for this week is standing firm in your faith, standing up for others, being hopeful for others. And the gospel for this week is that Jesus gives us hope in the face of those trials. The story, Carly's birthday gift, is a girl who stands up for her beliefs, specifically caring for the homeless, despite negative feedback from a friend at her birthday party. It's also a really nice example of friends forgiving each other. If we flip to the next page, in the connecting gospel and doctrine, here we go. Again, if you've been with us before, you know that I will tell you that page 4 is the heart of the lesson. It's the gospel and reader parts, the associated doctrine for that Sunday gospel, as well as your link to the What the Church Believes and Teaches handbook. If you look in that bottom right corner, in that venture blue, that's your clue to turn to the Catechism handbook. This week, the doctrinal connection is that Jesus promises to be with us, which is comforting both in the long term and in the short term as we struggle with things. And the WCBT prompt this week is related to the sacrament of confirmation, which you'll see on page 5 is also the Our Catholic Faith feature. Connected with that, of course, is the Catholic faith word for this week, which is grace. If we flip to the next page, the saints feature for this week, I want to point out that wherever possible, we try to put a saints feature in the week in which that saint's feast day falls. Sometimes it's simply because there's a gospel tie to that particular saint, but in most cases, as in the case with St. Elizabeth of Hungary, whose feast day is November 17th, we try to tie it to the calendar. One thing I'd also like to point out too is that in every lesson plan, we have a saints and feasts feature. So if it isn't included in the lesson, St. Elizabeth may then have also been included a brief write-up in that second page of all of your lesson plans. If we go to the Living the Gospel on pages 7 and 8, those are cards that you may choose to prep a set, and I'm going to leave that up to you. Sometimes it's nice to have a set prepped, or if you have the resources or of an aide who can help you prep all of the sets. At this age, cutting isn't a skill that you're working on with your students, so you really need not take the time in class to do that. If you have the opportunity to prep it in advance, I'd recommend doing that with this activity and then just clipping them together. With this, I would encourage you that these questions, it's still early enough in the school year that you may not have gone through all of these things. So this is an opportunity to see where students may be lacking knowledge, but that the answers are provided at the bottoms of all of these on the flip side. So let's use this as a game. Let's use it as an assessment of where they are, not so much as a test. So, try to set them up to be successful, pairing the students with, a stronger student with a weaker student in terms of their knowledge of the church. Let's flip to the next lesson for November 24th. This is the last Sunday in the liturgical year, the Solemnity of Christ the King. It's also the week in which Americans will celebrate Thanksgiving. So if you look at the cover of this lesson, this is one of our student response features in Venture, that's Kid Talk, in which these are actual students from St. Matthew Catholic School in Phoenix, and they answer this week's Kid Talk question: for what or whom are you most thankful to God? I want to point this out for a couple of reasons. One, because when you have your students read these, it's very nice to see all their responses, but we also want to take some time for the students to respond to this as well. And also, if they're interested in participating in a future Kid Talk, please send a request to editor@pflaum.com. Again, editor@pflaum.com. The theme of this lesson is the leadership or reign of Jesus Christ. The gospel is Jesus reigns with love and forgiveness. So if we flip to the story in this lesson, and I want to point this out again, in general, in both of the older levels, in Venture for 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, and then in Visions for 7, 8, and 9, we try to do a balance of fiction and nonfiction, plays, even comics, to attract different students of different learning styles. This happens to be an article, as was the last lesson. But again, we do try to mix it up in terms of this story that we offer, as well as the different activities. The story here, the focus of this are who are the leaders in friend groups, and are those leaders positive or negative, and helping students negotiate some of the negative things that that can come up in friendships. And in this particular situation, what kind of friends are these? This is a group of friends in which the leader is using pretty cruel exclusion tactics with the other girls, and how they respond. So a very relatable story. If we flip to the next page, this is the story of Jesus forgiving the good thief from the cross. I also want to point out here that this could be a difficult unit for students, because we're talking about the end of the world, and it's the end of the liturgical year, and then next week we're going to be talking about Jesus' birth and preparation for that during Advent. So that it's going to be important next week when we get to the first Sunday of Advent, to give the kids a solid understanding of where they are in the liturgical calendar, that we've ended one liturgical year and we're going to enter a new one. Otherwise, this timeline can get to be a bit, well, they view it as a timeline, and it can get to be a little confusing. Let's see. We ask our Catholic faith feature. Oh, excuse me, I'm going to step back just a quick sec. So the doctrine for this section is talking about how Jesus reigns. He is a leader who forgives. And then we transition into the WCBT. I sometimes refer to that by its acronym, What the Church Believes and Teaches. The doctrine lesson, the students will learn the 4 steps of the sacrament of penance and reconciliation. And then that transitions into the Our Catholic Faith feature, talking more about forgiveness in the ways that we ask for forgiveness during the Mass. The students will also be able to assemble a forgiveness book at the bottom of page 5. If you feel as though you need to prep one of those books in advance, please do. I think this one is pretty simple and won't really detract from the time in your classroom. If we flip to the Living the Gospel, don't forget to forgive. I would not recommend prepping these in advance. I just think there's cutouts on page 7. I think those will just get lost. They are color-coded, if you look to the different responses. Actually, I'm going to take that back. They are not. You may use them in any place you like. I would encourage you to use tape, though, instead of glue, so that the students can change their minds in the different responses of say and do. Just give them the flexibility. If they glue that down, it's a one and done. So use a little tape. There's a key there on the upper left of page 6. that gives you the words that ask for forgiveness, words that give forgiveness, actions that ask for forgiveness, and actions that give forgiveness. That's the code on those. All right, let us turn to page 8. On the page 8s, we try to do a balance of saints features, prayers, and also review activities. So puzzles most often are masquerading as review activities. So you can get an idea if the students have gotten the message that you've offered in that lesson, or if their cumulative knowledge is coming along. Again, this is not meant to be testing, but to just give you an idea of what your students are retaining and what you may need to go over more. As you note in the bottom, in the fine print, the answers are in the teaching guide. And if we blow it and the answers are not in the teaching guide, we encourage you to reach out to us at editor@pflaum.com. It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes it does. And we'll make sure that those answers are posted on the lesson update section at gospelweeklies.com. All right, we are on the third lesson in this unit, which is the first Sunday of Advent, and Happy New Year, Happy New Church Year. And we're also in the new season of Advent. You can point out to the students that they can also see that we've changed season as indicated by the bottom band on that page. We've gone from the feast day of the Solemnity of Christ the King to Advent, which is indicated by the violet band at the bottom of the page. And encourage your students to also note that change in your in the sanctuary of your church. And let's see here, prep an Advent wreath, whichever form that you would choose, whatever works for your classroom space. The theme of this lesson is to be ready, be prepared, and Advent is a time of preparation. The story in this lesson, this is very familiar if you have a bossy older sister or brother, or if you were the younger. I think everyone can identify themselves as an eldest, middle, or youngest child in this story. The message in this lesson is, if Jesus returned, how would you want him to find you? How would you, it's an encouragement of being prepared for Jesus' second coming. In this case, it's how do you want your parents to find you after coming home from an evening out? And these three children are going to be found in probably not an ideal situation. They are, the elders, kids are bossing the younger one around. And so it's a very relatable story for students. Again, this is the third fiction story in this unit. Let's flip to the next page. Again, continuing this gospel theme of preparedness and how Jesus is encouraging us that we don't know when the Son of Man will return, so we need to live our lives in preparation for his return. Then the WCBT lesson for this year, or excuse me, for this week, is to remind us that Advent invites us to grow and change and to be prepared for Jesus' return. During Advent, we celebrate Jesus' incarnation. This week's gospel celebrates that Jesus will come again, and we must prepare for both. The WCBT lesson follows the liturgical calendar, and we need to leave students with the point that Sunday is the most important day of the week during the liturgical calendar, and it recalls Christ's resurrection. If we turn to page 5, I point this out because this is the first of a 3-week series that emphasizes Isaiah. This first one, the first reading for the 3 weeks, for these next 3 weeks, is from Isaiah. It's important to show children the connections between the Old and the New Testaments, and this is a good example of how Jesus fulfills the prophet's messages. This is, note how the activity at the bottom encourages transition from negativity and divisiveness to positive and hopeful things. like the movement that we hope to make during Advent. The Catholic faith word, of course, is Advent. Let's flip to the Living the Gospel feature on pages 6, 7. We have an Advent calendar. You're going to want to separate that at the end of the class and make sure that the students post it at home, and they'll be adding to that week by week. I'd encourage you to hold on to your copy of your Advent calendar so that you can refer to it each week. It's not necessary that the student keep their Advent calendar at the parish or at school. It's important for them that it's posted somewhere in their home so that they can try to complete the different chosen Advent activities every day. So each week during Advent, there'll be a list of items that the students may choose from as options for things to do during Advent. And some of them are more complex and some of them are a little easier or simple to do. And if they just really can't identify things from the list that they like, encourage them to brainstorm some of their own ideas. But make sure that you hang on to your copy. Let's flip to page 8. Again, that's another Kid Talk response. What is your favorite way or place to pray? In this preparatory season, we encourage the children to spend special time in prayer. All right, we're running right along. We're in the second Sunday of Advent. This cover is based on Sunday's first reading from Isaiah about the lion and the lamb. It is a message of peace initiated by the coming of Jesus. Read Isaiah 11, 1 through 10, and have the children then identify the pairs, and they can draw lines between them if they like, or they can list them somewhere in a blank space on the page, however you prefer to do that. The theme is still we prepare for Jesus coming. The gospel theme is John the Baptist calling for change, repentance, and baptism. The story, or in this time it's in a play format, is in honor of Our Lady of Guadalupe, which is celebrated on December 12th. If we flip to the next page, one thing I just want to emphasize about the plays and also gospel reading is really, you'll note in the teaching guide that I always say to ask for volunteers. Many students, well, at all ages, even if they're very good readers, they're intimidated perhaps by reading aloud. If you find that you have a lot of that in your classroom, you could perhaps assign the story in pairs. That's sometimes a little less intimidating. But if you're going to read it as a large group, I encourage you to seek volunteers rather than assigning parts. And if you do find that you do need to assign parts, give the students an opportunity to go and find their parts within the story, or they're probably going to be doing that while you're reading, and then they won't be getting the whole message of the play. So we are on, I'm going to find my spot here. The gospel theme, again, John the Baptist teaches people to change. The doctrine this week emphasizes church teaching on baptism for the forgiveness of sins. The WCBT emphasizes the Immaculate Conception, which is observed this year on Monday, December 9th. The students, as a part of this activity, will identify all the feasts of Mary, which they will apply to completing the puzzle on page 6, which we will get to later. In the Our Catholic Faith feature, again, there is an emphasis on Sunday's first reading. You won't need to read it again. You can just briefly review it and then read the feature. Note that this week marks the second week on the Advent calendar activity, and instruct the children to select activities they will complete, or again, if you need to brainstorm some additional activities, you certainly can do that, and then encourage them to add their choices to their Advent calendars that they have at home. Also check in and see how they're doing. All right, if you go to the next page, if we could flip to the, yeah, there we go. Even though let's go to 7 and 8. I would encourage you to pre-assemble this STAR activity. It's just a little easier, and some students who are visual learners will appreciate seeing the finished product as they're working on it. If we turn to page 6 there, which is the puzzle, I'd encourage you to have the students try to answer the questions first based on what they learned in their catechism handbooks, and then have them go back and refer to them to complete the puzzle. And again, the answers are in the teaching guide. So if we turn to the next Sunday, the third Sunday of Advent, December 15th, this is a Jesse tree activity to help the children understand the lineage of Jesus' ancestors. Note the change of liturgical color. Ask the children if they know why this week, or this Sunday, the color is rose. And note that change on the Advent calendar, or excuse me, on the Advent wreath as well, that we've lit 2 violet candles, and this week we will also light the rose candle. This is Gaudete Sunday, which means rejoice. We rejoice because the coming of Jesus is so near. The theme this week, obviously, Jesus is the Messiah. If we flip this week to the story this week is actually a nonfiction article about reaching out to refugee families. We're a little ahead of the season because this is Valentine's, but if this prompts your students to want to do a similar project, it just plants those seeds a couple months in advance. What I like about this is actually 2 stories in one. It's important for children to understand that they can they can identify ways that they can help even in large world issues like the refugee crisis worldwide. If we flip to the gospel, John the Baptist asks about Jesus. Even from prison, the good prophet is trying to determine for certain that this is the Messiah for whom they have waited. If we go to the WCBT, to continue that idea of what the students have learned in this week's article, the children will learn the works of mercy and connect them to the loving acts in the article. If we go to page 5, we're continuing the study of the prophet Isaiah this week, the imagery and poetry of Isaiah. If you look at the bottom of the page, we have that Advent calendar list. They can identify or brainstorm ideas to add to their list at home, see how they're doing. Catholic faith word this week. I want to, can we flip back to that page? I want to point this out. You probably have already picked it up. This is actually lesson 13 for the year, but I just want to point out that we bold highlight that, that Catholic faith word in the text. And you can choose to follow the guide and introduce that Catholic faith word where we indicate it, or as you're coming across it in text, or to conclude your lesson on as a review activity. But we do give you that visual cue of the Catholic faith word within the text, and it always appears, it is always highlighted somewhere within the text. We try to keep it on this page 4 or 5 because it's usually either related specifically to the gospel for that Sunday or to the related doctrine. Sometimes you'll find it on page 5 as well. All right, going back to the lesson on pages 6, 7. Trim the tree. We try to stay out of more secular celebrations, but man, kids and Christmas, it's presents, it's trees, these things are familiar to them. And it can be very hard for children to keep the meaning of Advent and Christmas at the center of their minds. Presents are really exciting. And so this activity will help the children see how service can be the best gift, and these are gifts that they actually can give. They can write a card for someone who is alone. They can visit a neighbor who may be lonely, with a parent, of course. But to just kind of reframe the idea of a gift, and that gifts are not simply to be received, but also to be given. All right. turn to the last page. All right, we have a Saints feature here. Now, Saints features, if you have time in class, you can read them together, or you could send it home as something that the students can read with their families. It's a nice segue into the With My Family and Friends feature. If you work with any of the younger levels, Seeds, Promise, or Good News, you're familiar with the Family Corner. Because we want students 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th for visions to take ownership of their lessons, we've actually renamed that section With My Family and Friends. Same prayer, same question, and a similar activity. But that's also, if the students are sharing the Saints activity with their family, they will see that With My Family and Friends as well. And there's always a note in your teaching guide to encourage the students to share that lesson, specifically the With My Family and Friends section with their families. All right, we are on the 4th Sunday of Advent. Didn't that blow by? Just like actual Advent and Christmas. So the cover activity is children will identify Christmas symbols from the nativity scene and Christmas trees, wreaths, gifts, evergreens. The theme is God is with us. Let's flip to the story. And this is the Christmas bus ride. And this will be really relatable for the children. And could they put themselves in the main character's place, sacrificing a very special item for someone else? And in this case, it's the latest book in a series. I don't mean to give it away, but she shares the book with the girl who's on the bus. Again, a very relatable thing for students of this age, or really any age. Let's flip to the gospel. This theme of selfless acts transitions very nicely into this Sunday's gospel story. I'd encourage you at the bottom of page 5, you'll see a gospel background, and to read that briefly with the students before you introduce this story. There are certain things just contextually, Bible background wise, that could be a little confusing to the students. And also explaining to them that the significance of Joseph agreeing to be and accepting that he will be Jesus' earthly father. So read that first, and then invite volunteers to proclaim that Annunciation gospel. Discuss how Joseph is selfless, acting to protect Mary, and then choosing to protect Mary and Jesus as members of his own family. The doctrine for this lesson, or related to this gospel, is of course the incarnation, and this is foundational teaching in the church. And understand that the children may not fully understand this, as no adult can fully comprehend these Christian mysteries, but you will contribute to their understanding of Jesus being fully human and fully divine, Jesus coming to live amongst us as a human person. You're planting seeds here. The Catholic faith word, of course, for this week is incarnation. The Our Catholic Faith feature marks the third and final lesson focused on the message of Isaiah for Advent. And this week, it is the message Isaiah delivers to King Ahaz. If we flip to Living the Gospel, Jesus was born into a human family, and Christmas is, we discussed the importance of family in regards to the celebration of the Christmas season. If your family has traditions, many of them are related to holiday celebrations, and specifically Christmas. And this is an opportunity to get everyone in your classroom talking. Let's flip to the Saints on page 8. A little more background about Saint Joseph, as well as the week 4 Advent calendar list. Remind the students that they have not failed if they have not ticked off every single one of these activities. and encourage them to continue to complete some of these activities during their Christmas break. And they can complete some of these activities anytime. Obviously, they can't, wish Merry Christmas to people in February, but they can still offer kindness to neighbors. And they can bake a surprise for someone at any time. All right, let us go to the Christmas Epiphany lesson. Again, you're going to need to follow the calendar for your particular parish or school. Most classes are going to be back in session before Epiphany, or certainly during that week. So for most people, you're going to want to hang on to this lesson. Let's see. There is both the full gospel for Christmas and the full gospel for Sunday gospel for Epiphany are included in this lesson. Let's see. This lesson diverges from the standard lesson order. We have an opening activity, a story, the gospel doctrine, etc. So again, it'll be a little different, but the difference is explained in the lesson plan in the teaching guide. The theme for this lesson is that Jesus comes and comes to save all people. Point out that during Advent, the readings discuss the coming of the Messiah, and the Jewish people expected a very different Messiah. However, this Jesus came for the salvation of all of us. So the cover, of course, is the Christmas Gospel, and note the WCBT lesson on the Holy Days of Obligation. That segues nicely into the story or article on pages 2-3, which explains that Christmas is not just a day, but that it's a full season. And this is kind of an article, but more of an activity in which follows day by day through the Christmas season, with some activities, some Bible lookup. So you'll need to have Bibles available for the students. If we turn to the next page, this looks a little more familiar to us, like a standard lesson. We have the Epiphany Gospel, the related doctrine, and these things are all related to the Epiphany message that Jesus comes for the salvation of all people. Let's see. Again, we hear the words of Isaiah. Take time with this map study. There will be more in the next weeks as we get into Unit 3 and the mission and ministry of Jesus. But it helps students understand Jesus as a fully human person who once walked the earth, and with names that they know and countries that they know today. Catholic faith word is Magi. Let's see. Let's flip to the next page, the Living the Gospel. And this includes the Epiphany traditions from around the world. You can highlight each of these, or perhaps split them split the children into pairs, and they can report about one of these celebrations. Identify the things that are similar and different, and have the children speculate as to why other people in other nations exchange gifts and have huge celebrations on Epiphany and relatively smaller celebrations on Christmas. This is, if we flip to the next lesson. Okay, I just want to make a quick note too. This puzzle, again, is an Epiphany acrostic puzzle and acts as a review activity. Now, again, the final lesson in this unit for Venture is the baptism of the Lord. See, I said at the beginning, we covered a lot of ground in this unit. This one concludes with the baptism of the Lord. And we introduce this by talking about the different ways in which we belong. We belong to teams, we belong to our countries of origin and our families. And we belong in our church family as well through baptism. And we're invited to be a part of God's family. The theme for this lesson, of course, is that baptism gives us new life. The story is actually a nonfiction article. This time, if we flip to page 2-3. All right. This is the story of a Hmong family from Laos who escaped from civil war to eventually become Christian and living in the United States. The baptism story of the gospel. Jesus is baptized in the Jordan. The connecting connecting gospel and doctrine for this week is the significance of the sacrament of baptism. That it's a sacrament of Christian initiation, welcoming us into membership of the church. The Our Catholic Faith feature on page 5, this reminds the children that how at Jesus' baptism, the dove and the voice of God are present, and that these represent the Holy Trinity of God the Father, Jesus, his Son, and the Holy Spirit. And at Jesus' baptism, we more fully understand that nature of Jesus as both human and divine. This is also, we have in the WCBT, we talk about the sacraments of Christian initiation. Throughout the entire year, we address each of the sacraments. We will actually do an overview in Unit 3 with all of the sacraments. But this one, of course, is an easy connection to the sacrament of baptism. Let's see, if we turn to Living the Gospel, the children will explore the signs of baptism. They'll have an opportunity to share their own experiences or their families' memories of that experience, because they likely don't remember their own baptisms, and they'll celebrate a baptism prayer service. If you think of it in advance, it's nice if you can bring, well, the stories of your own baptism, if you have some to share, as well as if you have a garment, either of your own or for your children. If you have a family garment, if you have a baptismal candle, or anything else, photos, anything like that that you can share with the students. That's a nice thing to bring to that lesson. Let's flip to the last page in this unit. This is also a student initiated feature. If your students have any questions that you think other students would like to have the answers to, you can send their questions to editor@pflaum.com. And we will attempt to either answer them through our blog, in the lesson updates, or like these, in an upcoming lesson. Again, I encourage you to reference the guides for answers to your questions, conversation prompts, and then if you have further questions or if you need things, instructions for how to assemble a project that just aren't clear in the lesson. We're very committed to keeping our lesson plans to those 4 pages for each lesson. So we don't put those really extensive assembly instructions in the lesson plan, and to just make the lesson plan or the teaching guides huge. So we'll post them on the lesson update section on gospelweeklies.com. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Nicole. And also, if you have any questions about the website, the updates, again, you can just contact us at the customer service representative or editor@pflaum.com. If you have trouble logging in or finding a resource, just let us know about that. And now Erica will review the Venture bilingual lessons for us.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Erica De Urquidi. I'm the bilingual editor for Pflaum. I just want to point out a couple of things about Venture Bilingual. Of course, we're very happy that now we have the lessons completely in Spanish for you in the bilingual format. I want to encourage you to visit our website, pflaumweeklies.com, and to click on bilingual resources. You can find that by clicking on the browse menu up here. You will find a tab that says bilingual resources. You click on that and you're gonna find everything you need to teach your venture lessons in Spanish. You will find your teaching guides in Spanish. They are available for you to download. But if you prefer to have printed copies of those, you can just let your sales rep know, and we will gladly send you printed copies, but you have to request them. Otherwise, you will have to download them from our website. Also here on our Spanish resources page, you can find weekly videos in Spanish just to enrich your lessons. You are going to find the Gospel at Home, which is also available in Spanish. You're going to find your assessments for every lesson and for the unit. Now we have them in interactive format as well. Those are in Spanish. You can also find seasonal activities for this winter. These will be up in November on our website. Also, you can find here the scope and sequence for the whole year for Venture. It is also on the back of your teaching guide. You can find it in both places, either in the back of your teaching guide or here on the website, where you can make it a little bigger because the letter here is kind of small. I just want to remind you how important it is to use our teaching guides. All the answers for the activities are here, the instructions, the background for the gospel, for the doctrine. Please use it when it's a great resource for you to use when you're teaching your lessons, and we have it in Spanish for you. Also, we have the Catechism Handbook in Spanish. It's called Mi Fe Católica. It's a bilingual format. You can find the English and the Spanish side to side when you're teaching the lesson to the kids. A couple of things that I want to mention about this particular unit. On the lesson of December 8th, you're gonna see a crossword puzzle. It's gonna look a little different, the Spanish, when you put it next to the English. Of course, that's because when translating, we have to use different words, and the whole crossword puzzle gets changed. So it's the same content. Same with the lesson for Christmas and Epiphany. With this acrostic, I had to add a little, some of the letters and change some of the other letters. But it's the same content, and you can find the answers for these two on your teaching guide. Have a blessed second unit, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Erica. And again, if you have any ideas, questions, thoughts, email us at editor@pflaum.com. Also, if you'd like to participate in the Kid Talk questions or any other things that your students or you would like to be a part of for Venture, again, editor@pflaum.com. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope this webinar helps you with your lesson planning. God bless and have a great day.